Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon in this special filmmaker talk with Kidlat Tahimik. Please welcome him. So, unfortunately, last year, Kidlat wasn't here, but there was a strand called The Future Tense, in which his film from 1977, Perfume Nightmare, played. And since you couldn't be here last year, we decided, since you are here this year, you've been jurying the Envision competition.
The cosmic virus.
Because of the cosmic virus.
Closed the gates just when we were flying to Amsterdam.
But fortunately, you are here now, and we want to take this opportunity to share your filmmaking adventures. I'm not going to attempt to do this big retrospective talk in an hour because this is impossible. This is a very prolific artist, filmmaker, who has been making work now for decades. But some of the clips I've chosen to show, and then we'll also see, as you can see up here, more recent photos of a current exhibition installation that Kidlat has been working on that has direct reverberations to what he's been building over the last 40 years, particularly his Magellan origin story. I thought we would start with a long clip that to me sort of dovetails or encompasses or communes with a lot of the themes that you have been obsessed with over the years, and the ways in which you go physically into various communities and share and learn in a very tactile way, in a very sensorial way. So I thought we would start with a clip from Bubong, it's called. It's the Tibetan New Year, and it's sort of like your own pilgrimage, but also a pilgrimage on the part of the people who are rebuilding the temple. And so I thought we would show this extended clip, if I can beg your patience, to launch our conversation.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. What do you call snow? Car? Snow. What's this? Car. Okay. In Philippines, my country, Philippines, no snow. No snow. Always hot. No clothes. But now, here, wow, so much snow. I like. We had been trekking the foothills of the Himalayas when we finally encountered the Tibetan community at Tubten Choleng. Over 500 refugee monks and nuns lived in the shacks that surrounded the monastery. My sons and I came to see how the new temple was being erected with rocks carried on the backs of nuns from a nearby quarry. Wow, big! While at Tubten Choling, I found a new frame for that universal saying, I need a good roof over my head. Most of the roofs of these shacks were in dire need of repair. Most of them were dripping like hell.
and many nuns find sponsors so that they could get tin roofs.
So no more leaks in this part of the house.
No leaking at all. Mom, she's very happy about the tin sheet.
When did she get her tin sheets?
About 6 months.
About 6 months. So it affects his meditation.
근데 튼 sheet at the 강에 도해서 되게 잡아được.
나 대성아 티와 잠나디 튀인치 돌아라.
So while he's doing meditation, again he had to fix up the woods.
When it rained a while ago, was it very strong, the leak?
Today is not so heavy rain, that's okay, but if it rains really heavy, then it's really leaking.
Okay. It's funny, you know, this one, it means the roof of the world. It's French. Le toit du monde, the roof of the world.
So many leaking roofs here near the roof of the world. In 2002, my youngest son Kabunyan learned why the roofs of the Ifugao tribes were waterproof. Later, I decided to roof my own hut with ancient roofing materials of runo reeds and thatched kogon grass, and made with a lot of love. I often describe myself. I understand, okay.
You often describe yourself?
I often describe myself as a backyard filmmaker. I often just pick up a camera and pick up what's happening in my vicinity. So this sudden shot of me in Himalayas might give you the impression that I just buy a ticket any time and go where the action is, like maybe Werner Herzog, where there's a volcano erupting or something. But no, that was in a way, it was probably in the backyard. I was doing a spiritual quest, and I went to Kathmandu for several years in a row. And when I came across this, we did a pilgrimage to a foothill. And yeah, I guess I became part of their community for a while. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it became part of my backyard filmmaking.
But it's interesting how everything is pulled. I showed this for a lot of reasons, but for this beautiful edit that sort of comes back home to roost, so to speak, you know, there's this beautiful way in which you go out into the world and bring back, there's an exchange there that feels very natural and very open and loving. So I think when you do film, there's something intrinsic in what you're seeing in the communities around you that I think resonates very much with what happens at home.
Yeah, I suppose I even more reacted it today than I have before, to hear those Tibetan nuns laughing behind the camera. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of you do that. You pass the camera, especially today, you pass your camera to your kids or whoever's next to you. But then when I heard them laughing, I said, hey, that's participatory video, if we can call it that.
Yes, absolutely.
And somehow it what you're talking about, it connects the guy behind the camera with the people in front.
Absolutely.
Maybe that gives it a more feeling of a community while you're a spectator yourself.
But the way in which you weave your own story and the story of that of your family into whatever there is like it's the object lesson is not to learn a skill so much as to learn a way of life and to learn about this way in which community can protect itself. And I think it's just a beautiful reverberation on your own philosophy about how you've gone about creating your body of work, your body of film work. Why is it so important to you, or why has it become so important to you to have this open-ended way in which you can constantly come back and add and enhance things that you've shot in the past, things that you're thinking about in the present, and dreams that you have for the future in terms of the stories you want to incorporate in this. I feel like it's like a giant tapestry that you've created with your film work.
I guess, yeah, it's some kind of never-ending tapestry. You just keep weaving. I think it started just because well, first of all, I didn't go to film school, so I didn't have these hard, steady rules about finish it on the deadline, get in before the play date, blah, blah, blah. Before video came in, I had my Bolex camera. And I guess I was very impulsive with that. You know, you have to wind it, you have to focus, you have to make your shutter right before you take your shot. Today, everything is
Automatic.
automatic.
Yeah.
But I got into that rhythm of being quick on the draw. And when my yellow film was invited to Tokyo, it was the Tokyo Video Festival. I said, my film is really shot on 16 millimeter. Why are you inviting this? And Fujiko Nakaya, she's the head of that festival, said, it's because you shoot like with video. Your camera angles and the quickness with which you take your shots. So I guess from that playful relationship I had with my Bolex camera, well, it became easier with video, and so the nuns got it.
So in terms of your overarching, let's say, tapestry, there's always this way in which you are exploring how you put it in the beginning, this third world, first world gaze, and how important it is to keep expounding upon this, I guess, dichotomy in a very personal and a very complex way. It's not just down to economics. It's not just down to society. It's something much deeper than that. And I wanted you to kind of share, for those people who maybe aren't that familiar with your work, that theme of the celebration of the natural gifts that exist in the third world.
I think this, it could be a dichotomy of first world, third world gaze. I happen to live probably in both worlds.
Yeah.
But at least I haven't picked up an anthropologist's eye or a academic researcher looking at. I think because of the playful relationship I have with the camera. Just during this festival, I bumped into somebody I'd known from long ago, Pat Auflerheide, who's teaching. And she was the one who introduced me to the third cinema concept. When my film came out in 1977, The Perfume Nightmare, people talked immediately about, here's an example of third cinema. And I thought, third cinema, I'm a third world filmmaker. I talk about the third world subject, and I'm shooting it in the third world. So I thought, maybe I am a third cinema.
But what did that connote to you? I mean, in terms of
at that
filmmaking?
time, I saw it in the critiques would mention that, and I thought that was my reaction. I thought, okay. And I think only maybe about 10 years ago, I understood, that third cinema is a heavy, ideological, very precise kind of framing that maybe, I don't know if in those days my playfulness could even qualify it. Very serious definitions of your first world, third world gaze. So I think it I accidentally fell into the category, and maybe my storytelling is parallel to what they're doing, but I didn't have this
This framework.
very precise, explicit framework, which maybe makes my films a little bit different, and maybe because what you said, that personal playfulness. I may be talking about economic theory.
No, but there's also a temporality to it. There's a non-linearity even within a clip. Here, you're going back and forth in time. I think there's a way. I think part of the magic of watching a work of yours is the lack of, I would say, the logical. There's a dream logic there. That you're always relying upon the spectator to sort of go with you. You know, there's a way in which you edit that is not conducive to the sort of analytical way of talking about a specific topic, talking about a specific issue, talking about some personal thing you might be going through. I mean, you live in an environment and also a climate that is constantly, things are constantly being destroyed. Things are constantly being eroded, washed away. Nothing is temporary. You know, the idea is that there's nothing so precious that, you know, won't be affected one way or the other by the circumstances you're living in.
Maybe I'm not tied by the protocols of editing. If you go to film school, or even if you don't, but you've studied how Godard does his montage, and then people become very aware of that as filmmakers. So my first film, Perfume Nightmare, was just and I was surprised that what I did came out how it did in my first festival. But I think because I didn't have those protocols of thou shalt not, and I thought I was doing a Hollywood film when I did Perfume Nightmare, just because I could shout, "Ready, camera, clap."
But there are also some documentary elements in there as well, you know, where you're grabbing things that you're seeing immediately on the street, you're incorporating all that's going on around you, and there's also this way of being this, you know, misfit in this environment you're finding yourself in and trying to make sense of what it is you're encountering, you know, in your own way. And so the freedom of that, the freedom of relying on your own intuition, your own instinct, you know, I think is how you work visually. And then, I don't know, the editing, I don't know if you can explain it any you know, better when you sit down with a ton of footage. What happens in your mind that's different from when you're out there with your camera?
Okay, I think when I'm shooting, it's very instinctive. It's very playful and spontaneous. And then once I start the actual storytelling in the editing room, I'm very much a storyteller who, maybe like the village storyteller who, whatever's there in front of him, okay, there was this person, then, there was a barrier here, and, you know, and anything that you can get hold of becomes part of the story, and it's not tied to production design, and so your story, you're free also eventually to keep changing that linearity, and then you come up with something that nobody has seen. So I said, oh, I'm not a genius who did that. It happened. And a lot of my films just happen. I think that's the freedom that I have.
Mm-hmm. So could you ever make a Hollywood film with this big, huge crew and everyone telling you what to do and someone saying, look at the time and we have this much time and
the bankers are waiting.
And the bankers are waiting. The investors are anxious to hear, blah, blah.
No, I don't think I even if somebody gave me would give me an amount of money. Okay, just by chance, Perfume Nightmare was picked up in America by Zoetrope Studios, and Francis Coppola, when I came for the premiere in 1981, he was finishing a film in Hollywood, and it was just, I think he was going to hawk his big studio because the bankers were running after him, and so he told his special project director, Tom Blood, he said, "Come on, send Kidlat over. We're on the last days of They were filming one from the Heart. It's a film that didn't really get.
Ended up being disastrous,
But
unfortunately.
so I said, okay, wow. So I was there, and you have thousands of people, and everybody doing their little bit. Natasha Kinski was in her cage with a snake, I think something like that, and Francis was in his van, and of course here's this little Bolex winder filmmaker, and you have all these Mitchell cameras, and I was absorbing the situation, but I knew inside that even if I had a chance to do this, how will I run this aircraft carrier, with hundreds of people to give a command to? You want to stop the ship because you want to film that particular coconut grove. But I'm so used to the canoe, and stop, shoot.
Exactly.
So I don't think I would be able to. It's not a question of having the money, it's another culture for me.
It is totally. And unfortunately, it often ends up in very mediocre filmmaking, shockingly. That's the shock of it, I mean, that if you work in that Hollywood system and see all the accoutrements that it takes to make a film, and yet somehow the film is lacking sort of any life. It's like dead on arrival. Whereas your work always has this life to it, even no matter how old the footage is, no matter how maybe damaged, or corroded, that there's texture there. There's texture visually and there's texture emotionally. And I think that has directly to do with how you shoot.
Well, one thing, I remember also when Perfume Nightmare premiered in Berlinale, and after that there were some young film students who said, "Hey man, how did you get that very grainy effect on that first shot of the bridge?" And I said, "What, did I do that?" I just had to buy film that was expired by 5 years. It was the cheapest material I could get, and I didn't even notice that it was grainy. But this kind of cosmic acceptance of what comes into your film, I think allows it to connect with audiences, or even film audiovisual makers who are not so obsessive or anal about the technical perfection, and they prefer to go into what you're talking about, a life in the story, which sometimes can be killed by over-technical considerations.
Yeah. Let's watch a clip from Perfume Nightmare for those of you who haven't seen the film or didn't catch it last year.
When I got to Paris, the supermarket had grown 2 blocks longer.
That's the Pompidou Museum.
Yeah.
Stop crying, Kidlat. Stop crying like a baby. 1 market vendor less. means one parking space more. Progress, my boy.
The ghost of progress visited us. Dear Kidlat, how are you? Do you remember the forest where you became a one? The government raised down the trees to make way for a new highway for tourists. Who will stop this madness?
Viking 1 has landed on the surface of Mars. Confirmation of that came less than a half an hour ago.
Yesterday, I helped your mother move her house. We walked all day. But no matter how far we walked, it was never far enough. Everywhere we went, we could not avoid the planter of new forest. Kidlat, one day you will come to know the quiet strength of bamboo.
Quiet strength of bamboo. That is why we have no progress. Kaya, you still refuse to see why bamboo art is doomed to extinction. I am living in a tower that is 500 years old, and it will survive another 500 typhoons and earthquakes. Kaya, you cannot build rocket ships from bamboo.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's such a beautiful sequence. You can applaud.
I think that's one of my special effects where I didn't have to spend $20,000 that George Lucas would spend.
Well,
actually, we happened to be at the chateau of a friend in Paris, and I had asked my wife to do the shot while I go up there and clean the gumball machines. Katrine is over there. Hi, Katrine. But the thing is that I just asked her to shoot me cleaning the gumball machine, but while I was coming down the stairs, she panned down, and it was part of my footages, and it would have been my outtakes. But later, when I decided to use a space theme, I said, with a little rumbling from NASA, and her pan down, it could become a rocket ship. So
it could become a rocket ship. Well, what I'm seeing here, first of all, is such a beautiful sort of iconographic cinematic imagery that I feel has been imitated by so many young filmmakers since then. I mean, I see the way in which you shoot the beauty of the Philippines, but at the same, I'd like for you to talk about your political drive as well, to always circle back to what's happened there, what's happening there, the circumstances of that, the reverberations of that. I mean, that's when we talk about first world, third world, dichotomy, that's not really the point so much as the effect, that certain political movements, certain things that have happened in your homeland are also affecting your storytelling. I feel that there is this, these layerings of all the years that have gone by, and you manage to really gracefully, very gracefully, pull in these things without a dissertation. It's in the story of the film.
Okay, for example, here in those shots that we just saw. Before this, I was an economist, and a little secret, I got an MBA. and I tore my diploma just before that. But anyway, that's another story. But it's, you can get stuck to that, you know, the economic chaos or exploitation. But I think are also like current issues. There's war, and the bullies are doing their thing. But I think for me it was more, I've been more interested in the cultural impact of, let's say, the Americans taking over the Philippines. We are a very colonized country in the sense we don't even speak English in the Philippines. We speak Americano. This is why the Philippines is one of the call centers of the world now. It's much easier to understand the Filipino explaining what's wrong with your car on the call center than an Indian with a very thick English accent. But the cultural effect on, let's say, the character in my film is an admirer of rocket technology of America. And actually, in the film, he wants to go to America to become the first Filipino astronaut. But these kinds of dreams have been imposed. But do I show the cruelty of imposing and making us give up our cloth and wear pants? I think it was more important to get the feeling of here there is a loss, and the jungle has been decimated. Now it's up to you to judge whether that's good or bad in terms of cost-benefit analysis. But maybe there is, and that's what we often overlook, is those kids playing in that forest are now have a little last-minute playing on the tree trunks. But where after this, where go vadis, no? Where will it go? So that is maybe a sense that I experienced, but maybe because I had a chance to live and study in America for a while, I got the chance to reevaluate what we've lost. So yes, I'm a romantic, and in the previous clip where I interact a lot with indigenous people, because I'm beginning to experience what we've lost, and maybe we can revive the source of it, because most of it is now, hey, it's cool to be like them in New York. It's cool to be like them in Amsterdam. Let's be like them. And it's almost shameful to be following the rituals or the lifestyle. So it's more to neutralize the shame. Colonialism has brought a lot of shame to the people who have to be, they have learned to be cool like their colonizers. But then to begin to know, hey, there's a lot of, it's also cool to be like my grandfather. He had some wisdom, he had something maybe that the world is looking for now. Our world out of balance needs to know what my farmer grandfather knew when they were building the rice terraces thousands of years ago. So even I'm guilty of being romantic, but I think we have to reframe the world. The third world gaze is probably mistakenly. We have, like the new emperor's clothes, we're mesmerized by progress and GNP and Wall Street's machinations, but in the end, we don't know what we're going to lose. And maybe that's my role. That's why I ended up in that village with my fellow tribal people.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is we're on the verge of losing everything. And I think even the work you're doing now, that is a reverberation of this, the overriding mythos of Magellan's journey and all of the people who came to discover new lands, or in revisionist history, the colonialists. I mean, this is not something they called themselves. They called themselves explorers. They called themselves.
This picture here, that's Lapu-Lapu. He's the guy who cut off the head of Magellan, who never completed his circumnavigation. But, okay, again, storytellers would rather focus on that big battle, and you get Hollywood images of, that final moment, the victory. But I think I'm trying to reframe Lapu-Lapu as a cultural hero.
Mm-hmm.
He refused to pay allegiance to the King of Spain that Magellan was proposing. That's Magellan, and that's his slave who showed him the way to cross the Pacific, Enrique. These are little stories that maybe, because of the predominance of the archives, historical evidence, the heroes have always been Magellan and Columbus, and of course now we're changing that. But the cultural impact is something that has been probably entering my films, something that we have lost, and can we get it back? Can we share it back with the world? Because
So this tale of Enrique, his journey, his circumnavigation of the globe, and finally he is given his freedom. This film, Balikbayan, was this long film where those things sort of came home to roost. Again, using your own family, using your friends and neighbors, using a way in which you can take where the environment that you're in and recreate those things. And you inhabit the character of Enrique over and over and over again. In fact, you say this is the film that you've been making for the last 40 years. This is an accretion.
I'm not trying to get into the Guinness Book of Records. It just,
this is an accretion.
I started the film in 1979, but it was just basically an idea that I wanted to pursue. Like the first man to circumnavigate, the first man on the moon. It was part of this momentum. But I think while I was going through it, I began to go more into the person of Enrique, the slave of Magellan. How could he have influenced with his tribal cosmology, with his maybe being able to speak with the whales and maybe with the sea, what the Europeans considered as sea monsters were actually the sea amigos of seafarers from Austronesia. But of course, the narrative has been stuck to taming the wild west, and therefore also the wild ocean dwellers. But it's always part of this, call it macho or just call it a colonial, having to overcome. And maybe that's what the world is still on, this narrative. And maybe the science of global warming are telling us this is the price of that never-ending exploitation. I mean, exploitation is such a cliche word, but what I mean is that it's just not living with nature as your fellow cohabitant. In the last 2 decades, my wife, Katrine, has been going into indigenous psychology, and we came from she came from wanting to understand her partner. Right? Maybe there's nothing more polar than a German and Filipino marriage. Katrine? But it's been important for me because a lot of things that come out in my installations or even my films are related to this looking for our I mean, why should we study Filipinos through Sigmund Freud, through Carl Jung, and through Skinner and his rats? We have to find our own methodology. So even our whole colonial education is bringing us into that corner.
Right.
And all our Filipino filmmakers who studied Hollywood films are also going into that corner. But the whole thing is that if we understand that the indigenous culture, the pre-colonial culture of many countries has been an including culture, we project the self on the other. Everything I decide when it concerns you, I include you in our decision. And this is a very different paradigm from the West. And now I don't want to make villains between us and the West. I'm just saying that maybe industrialization has created that kind of anonymity. We're as I gave examples to my friends here. Yeah, Pam, you're my friend, but I know you're after my job and I'm after your job. So there's always a kind of a barrier, and that becomes a cultural default.
Right.
And maybe that's why the world is now losing touch with being cohabitants with the trees. So in the tribal people you saw there, they look at the trees as the word is kapwa. We include you, the other, with the me, with the self. So this kapwaness does not only apply to you and me, or to me and other people, or to my family, but it also applies to Mother Nature. The trees are part of my family. The river is my uncle or whatever. But we've lost that.
Yes.
And maybe if Enrique was probably showing that to Magellan, maybe that was giving a little bit of success to that voyage. You know? But it's just that something we've taken for granted because the narrative has been the dominant narrative of the colonialists. So maybe we have to listen to our indigenous brothers and sisters.
Well, there's a beautiful scene actually featuring one of your sons in Balikbayan. I think it's clip number 4 that I'd love to play right now because this is exactly what you're referring to.
Let's look at it.
Mga hakbang malalaki sa pilapil na walang hanggang. Mag-ingat. Naninibago ka sa bagong daan. Malayo ang iyong paparunan.
Tugo, ngundakan apum. Kanine kayo.
Mga hakbang matatag, akyatang lakaran, bawat hakbang palapit sa kasagutan na naghihintay sa dulo ng hagdanan. Mga hakbang malalaki, katapusan ng lakbay, ay ayan na.
mata ko.
I love that little gesture you're pointing out. It's like,
So a little bit of the context here is that the gentleman has been looking for an old man that he bumped into, but they're finding out that in the past life they've been Magellan and Enrique. So that was the first encounter after going up after a long search. But yeah, it's again also in a way it's an encounter with the old ways or with an old wisdom. And why is this young man in search? He doesn't also know, but he's just he needs to connect with something that will make sense of his life.
mhm. But even the text here, which, did you write that text too? That it's very poetic. It's just like the forward momentum, just keep moving forward and take that trek
Yeah.
and keep moving towards whatever it is that you're looking for. It's just a very beautiful way in which you converge the natural man, let's say, with the philosophical man, but the idea, even in the first clip with, that pilgrimage up to in Tibet, towards something. You don't know exactly what you're seeking. You partially find it, but I think the resonant part of what you found, you brought home again, learning how to rebuild roofs, all of these reverberating lessons between one indigenous culture and another. There's also that sort of telegraph line, if you will, that sort of supersedes any kind of Western sensibility or any kind of capitalist system. And it's just, I think, again, throughout your whole film work, you've tapped into that so beautifully. Again, you're saying it's very intuitive and intrinsic to your nature, but you're also, in the edits you're presenting, you're also sort of saying a lot about that forward momentum.
I remember when we were just trying to fill out, I'm not really a poet who writes regularly things, but sometimes when I'm in the editing room, I try to find something to express what's happening. I like the way you framed it. But for me, it was really literally walking
One
those
step in front of
terraces.
the other.
Because I remember the first time I was also walking those terraces, I was trying to maintain my balance. But in the end, it's also like a line from the Perfume Nightmare. When the sleeping typhoon blows off its cocoon, the butterfly can embrace the sun. People ask me, is that something from your folklore or what? And no, I think sometimes in the darkness of your editing room, something cosmic comes in, and later when you see it on the film, did I write that?
That's wonderful that you can surprise yourself too.
Yeah, I get surprised sometimes when I have a little distance from the work.
In the time we have left, can you talk about what we've been seeing on the screen here and this sort of trajectory between what we've been watching and
Okay,
the work
this
that
is,
the installation you're working on now?
I decided to add a few images of my. It's an installation I did last year. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to come to last year's IDFA straight from Madrid because we built this installation at the Palacio Cristal. I don't know if you know where it's a big nursery-like glass and steel structure in the middle of Retiro Park. But since I've been working on the Magellan film since 1979, I started the film in 1979, and it was the 16 millimeter era. So I shot a lot of period piece with costumes, and then I think as I was going along, of course, it's partly you run out of funds, you run out of everything, but I think it was always in the back burner, and I continued. And about 2013, I started adding new footages, and since I couldn't, there's a Hollywood term, continuity. And how do you have continuity when I was shooting? I played the slave of Magellan 40 years ago, and now I have wrinkles, I have a pouch. My hair is not as as dark as it was. Did we see any footage of the earlier part of the film? Anyway, 40 years later, and I don't have the Hollywood budget to have a casting director look around the world for somebody who looked like me. So instead, I just said, to make the story go on, why don't they meet again, the slave and the master, but 500 years later in a festival in the mountains. And that's how I tried to resolve ending the film.
But I think it works beautifully, actually.
And I think it was important because partly, I think just as an evolutionary thing, when I started making the film, okay, it was just a cliche, the master and the slave. So to film the slave wearing a loincloth and then the overdressed European was an easy way to put the casting of the roles. But it was two-dimensional. It was just up to that. But in the meantime, I was adopted by that village, and I lived with them for the last 20 years, off and on. And my mentor, an elder from that village, was opening my eyes to a lot of things that I lost with my public school education that we inherited. The benevolent assimilation school to make us like them. And that, since I missed out on that, now it was my chance to catch up. And so it became part of the story that not just a costume role playing, but I understood how rich their culture was. I understood how many things that we value today because of world economy, consciousness and world trade and all these kind of things that our leaders have picked up. And during the time of Marcos, that was the big word. And I'm sorry that maybe now we have a return bout with another Marcos.
Exactly.
But I guess there are enough filmmakers who can get into those issues. But I think if I would make something that would resonate on that.
Ramona Diaz is I don't know if you know her work, but she's very much doing that top-level political.
So those are the trending topics.
Exactly.
But I think if I try to work on the loss in a village or the loss to certain people from that village because they have been attracted by the American dream. I mean, without any judgment, just that maybe it's an external dream that maybe, you throw away everything else without giving it a second thought. And maybe we need to think about these things. And if I try to show the slave Enrique as the guy who makes Magellan a successful conquistador, then maybe the people from the villages will take a second look. No? Like here, these are images of the Hollywood missiles with Spider-Man attacking our culture, but here the wind gods on the rickety old boats. And then here, I tried to bring it into today. These are the plague doctors during the pandemic in the Middle Ages. And if you wonder why they had beaks, they had herbs in their beaks so that they could look for among the dead people in the street and rescue some live people. So I brought it to the present, but it's all part of the narrative. I mean, we know that Columbus brought missiles to America, and Pizarro brought stuff to Peru, and Cortez brought chicken pox. And so I said, nobody's written about it, but maybe Magellan brought some kind of virus to the Philippines. So I included it, which updates my installation. But the installation itself is just a tail end from 44 years of trying to find an ending for a film that Hollywood would never produce.
No. In the minutes we have left, I hope you'll indulge me in playing one more clip that I find is very beautiful, and that is also bringing your filmmaking persona and your role as a father, and a family man, intertwined again throughout all your work. It was upon your 50th birthday, and this was a letter to your sons. And if you wouldn't mind, I would just love to play it because I think it's quite beautiful. So if we could play the last
It's called
clip.
Orbit 50, Letters to My Son on my 50th orbit around the sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I turn it off?
Wait,
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being my cameraman.
My dear boys, I am now near the finish line of my 50th lap around the sun. Like an Olympic runner, my thoughts focus on finishing well. To be a father and to be a filmmaker. How to balance these? When I look at my films and videotapes, I can proudly say that I was a father first, and then a filmmaker. In that order. Maybe that's why it now takes 12 years to finish a film. But I have no regrets. You know, each of your personalities is so different. Yet the three of you together reflect who I am today, my weaknesses and strengths. I shall continue to learn from you, my sons, in our next 50 orbits. Okay?
50 years, wow. I just turned 80, so that was 30 years ago.
Not quite at 50 yet. We'll meet here again in 20 years on your 100th.
Oh, okay.
Turn around the sun. Thank you, Kidlat, so much for this delightful hour. It's been so lovely to talk to you. We
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
your framings too. I'm happy when you've found things that I've never thought about.
Oh. No, well, your work is a constant discovery. It really is. It's so rich and beautiful, and I really appreciate it.
But I think I've also had my wife being a mirror with her own Western background and her looking into our culture. So it's been a very healthy reframing that has come out of that. And if it comes out in crazy films like you've seen, well, thank you, Katrine.
And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Have a good day.